So it's awesome to be here on Awakening Dialogues, and here I am today joined by Elloa Atkinson. It's a joy to be here with you today.
I'm so grateful and excited to be here with you, Will. Thank you.
And I can hear seagulls in the background. That's kind of cool. We don't usually have this.
We're in West Worthing, and that's why.
Yeah, the south coast of the UK, to those who might be wondering where on earth that is. And we, as ever, we invited you to suggest something that felt alive to talk about out of our suggested topics of conversation. I was really happy with what you came back with. You said it was around the role of teacher, the role of spiritual teacher or wisdom teacher in this day and age.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by that topic. I'm a long-term student and teacher of A Course in Miracles, and the course teaches that you can't be one of those without being the other at the same time. So that's just a topic that consistently fascinates me. And then tied up with that for me is the whole question and the conversation about leadership and what does it mean to be a conscious leader in a world that really needs awakening leaders and needs people who are walking with integrity and commitment and a real sense of how interconnected we all are. And there's been some specific things recently that have been really on my mind about this role of teacher. So when you offered up the topics, that was the one I was like, oh, definitely number 6.
And it seems that there's something I've witnessed in the whole spiritual space or the conscious space, something very new that wants to emerge around what used to be the guru-student relationship. There was a really clear division between the enlightened one, or the one who knows, and then the minions, the ones that don't. And I know that in my experience, there's something really repugnant about that, and there's something really delightful about meeting people in a space of equality, where that teacher-studentness, the two being one, is actually recognized in both the people sitting around and the person at the front of the room talking or speaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what does it mean for you to be a conscious leader? How do you actually live being a teacher and a student when you're taking on the role of a leader or a teacher?
I think in some ways, one of the challenges that I consistently face around it, one of the questions I consistently have to just address is even realizing and acknowledging that I am a teacher. Just acknowledging that. We were speaking a moment ago about how surreal this whole life thing is. And sometimes I think back to how I was 10 years ago, or the places in my life where I've had a real struggle, a real emotional, spiritual, inner struggle going on. And just coming to terms with that teaching, that, oh yeah, I'm a teacher too, is big for me. So that's a starting point for me. And I think starting there and acknowledging that and actually allowing myself to grow into that role, to walk down the street or to go into a coaching session or to have a business meeting with somebody, with that at the front of my mind is, it's a really powerful concept, and it's one that over the years has really invited me to continue to play a bigger game, to raise my game, to actually recognise that everything I say creates an impact somewhere. Like in A Course in Miracles, it says that everyone teaches and teaches all of the time. And so recognising that, it's like, wow, I'm teaching something every moment of the day. On the days when I choose to kind of, roll around in fear or, self-pity or romance with the story that is running through my head, the ego story. Recognising that, oh, this is a teaching, and is this what I want to be learning? And recognising that the two aren't separate. I think there's the parallel with the guru and the minion piece, is that there was such a sense of separation between the two for so long. The teacher is the one with the knowledge, and I studied education actually at university, so I was fascinated by this idea that education isn't about imparting knowledge from people who have it to people who don't, but it's actually about lighting a fire. It's about revealing what's already there.
Facilitating rather than teaching or telling. And there's two things that come up for me when I hear you speak about those topics. One was I very much resonated with the owning of being a teacher and having something valuable to offer. The small ego voice that would still be in that 10 years ago of maybe shame or insufficiency or lack of worth. And it's absurd to be taking on a role of teaching. And yet the truth of this moment now is that's what's happening. And for that to come from an authentic place, to own that value, to own that worth, to own that truth that's coming through or being spoken. And the second thing that came up for me was absolutely, this is the responsibility of everyone. We're always teaching. We're always teaching. It's a full-time job, every second of every day. I like the phrase, our vibration is our teaching. And we're either vibrating in fear or love, I think would be a Course in Miracles perspective on that.
Absolutely. And to recognise that responsibility is a really significant thing, but it's not necessarily always a really earnest or serious thing. I know that you love to laugh and you love to delight in the playfulness of what it means to be alive, and I've definitely got a lot of impish energy, playful energy, and I like to take that piece about teaching and go out into the world and break some of the rules. So I will regularly in the supermarket lean on the trolley and just whiz down the aisle.
Kid thing going down?
Yeah, with my feet off the ground.
Yeah.
Or skip
It's
down
fun,
the
right?
street. It's so fun. It's so fun. And it's like the part of the mind, the ego mind, the little mind that says, you can't do this. This looks ridiculous. This is...
And it would say that out of fear of being rejected or fear
Judged.
of...
Yeah. Mocked, ridiculed. And it's all about, it taps into that shame. It taps into that fear. And to actually just break that rule and say, this is what being alive means. Why can't I, be here and put a flower in my mouth? Why can't I do a cartwheel? Says who? Children walk through this world very free and flexible. Why not us too?
There's something that moves me really powerfully about that, because that's a very powerful teaching to offer in Lidl or Tesco's or wherever, where spiritual teachings might not be so freely available, to actually embody fearlessness, to offer that which is free from judgment. So this is part of, excuse me, part of the Love and Truth Party we were speaking about as a project, is to create these moments of teaching, create these moments where the matrix is disturbed, where the matrix of fear and ignorance is disturbed by these moments of fearlessness. I think you've got haven't you done a series of these fearless activities and so on?
Yes, yeah. So last year, I can't quite remember how it came to me, but I got this idea for fearless expression. And the two words came at the same time, and I was like, that's what I most deeply want to experience. I'm quite a creative person. I'm a very emotional person. I want to express myself without fear. I want to own it. And that owning it is there's so many layers to it, Will. There's so many different aspects of it. It could be that I'm having this conversation with you, and to the outside world, it might, or to you, or to anybody who knows me, it might look like I'm sitting here having the time of my life. But if there's an experience or a quality of self-consciousness around it, and a kind of worry and a rigidity and a nervousness about it, that's the place where I want to lean in and say, okay, let's add a bit more play, let's add a bit more self-acceptance, let's add a bit more kind of playing with this and seeing, is it really true what I'm scared is true right now? Is it true? And so fearless expression, I decided to start this 5-day challenge and invited people on Facebook really from all over the world, and I've done 3 of them so far. And we spend 5 days looking at the nature of the ego story that's running, and then identifying where that comes from in childhood or where it came from in the past, allowing ourselves to feel the feelings, because so often we don't feel the feelings that come with those beliefs. Instead we numb them, we run away from them, we avoid them, we distance ourselves from them, and we stop ourselves from feeling them because they feel uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to feel shame, it's uncomfortable to feel scared, it's uncomfortable to feel I don't know, like on the edge of that courageous step. And then we lean in and hold each other's hands and say, let's do it anyway. And it's just been an incredible experience to watch people go through an experience of childlike play, an experience of unleashing something from within themselves that wants to come out, something that wants to actually be out in the world, but at some point in a person's life they've decided to put a lid on it and say, no, this isn't okay, it's not okay for me to be this person or to be this way, and to actually go back and correct that belief. For me, it's all part of the journey of remembering wholeness and remembering who we really are. And then there's a domino effect that happens, and that's the thing that's happening in Lidl. The ego mind might judge somebody who's skipping down the aisle in Lidl as crazy or stupid or whatever words want to come with it, but I think that anytime we teach from that really whole place, we also connect to the place in other people that says, oh wow, what if that might be possible for me as well?
Yeah.
There's something in me that wants to be playful and childlike and innocent and creative and just follow my instincts and my curiosity and see what happens, rather than constantly censoring myself.
And that offers a view into how that offering of vibration or example can ripple out. So it might be that in the supermarket, the majority of individuals are like, what on earth is she doing? You know, she's mentally ill or something like this. It'd be some ego story would come in. And then there might be just one or two people perhaps who go, that even if it may not be conscious, there's a recognition, there's a movement towards that, because the authenticity and the vulnerability that such an act of fearlessness embodies, the transmission there, is what everyone's seeking. Everyone desires that, whether we're open to that or conscious of that or not. So I'm loving this fearless expression notion, and you know, I know in my own experience, seeing where that fear would still arise. This morning I was in communication with my friend, and there was a fear of upsetting her, a fear of a reaction. So there was a modification of my speech. And what that led to was a modification, of course, of the teaching or the transmission, and it created precisely the disconnect that I'd sought to avoid. And the beautiful thing was we were able, in vulnerability, in fearlessness, to look at this and go, wow, how interesting that happened. So this teaching, it happens in our relationships, it happens in our shopping, it happens in our every single moment. There's such a power in this notion.
I think once you take it on as a role and you actually begin to be conscious that you're a teacher, it starts to inform every area of life. And so suddenly the supermarket shop isn't this drudgery, it isn't this, oh, I'm standing in another queue. Suddenly driving isn't just driving, there's another element to it. And it opens up a whole different aspect of the matrix of like, how can I be in this experience, in this moment, in a different level of consciousness? How can I be in a different...
the world, but not of the world,
exactly.
as one chap said. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Who said that?
I think it may have been Jesus Christ, but it was a long time ago, and my memory's not so good, so I wouldn't say with any certainty.
I love the way you called him a chap.
That's so English, isn't it? I say restroom and so on, so there are certain ways I've been cultured and other, but I am still at heart English.
Such a good chap, that Jesus fellow.
Well, so they say. And he's I love Jesus, which is really funny, because I grew up as someone in a Christian culture and rejected so much of that, because I saw through the nonsense of a lot of religious teachings and the hypocrisy and so on. And in this country, in the UK, there's such a sensitivity towards anything that smacks of religion. So if this was shown in a mainstream thing, the moment that I said I love Jesus, most people would switch off. But what I love about this character is the teaching that he offered, which is precisely that everyone is a teacher, everyone is a son of God. And of course Christianity's got its own 36,000 different stories about what Jesus was saying. But if we can work with the heart of that as being a spiritual revolutionary, there's something incredibly powerful for our culture today that is in need of not just one Jesus or one Gandhi or one Nelson Mandela, but it's in need of tens of thousands of individuals to step up as teachers. And that excites me immensely about this work that we're doing.
When you say tens of thousands, it just broadens the context of it, because I think that for me as a human being, I definitely can get sucked into thinking that it's just you, Will. It's just you and Marianne Williamson and Gabrielle Bernstein and the few teachers who have these really big followings. And so there's definitely a piece in there about this, going back to the guru piece about how big is the following? How big is the platform that you're speaking on? And we live in this very social world nowadays where you can measure and track
how many likes
and what your influence is. And I think going back to the supermarket example, one of the things that I consciously try to remember and then teach overtly and without any words is that you don't know the impact that you're making. And I see that all the time because I have a podcast that is steadily growing in numbers. But I often won't hear anything for a while from anyone. So I'm just putting these conversations out into the world in trust and fear. Let me be honest.
Absolutely.
And trust and fear and back and forth and back and forth. And then occasionally, when I'm in a place of surrender, something amazing happens, which is I'll get lots of messages from people, one after the other, just saying, I listened to the show, thank you so much. That thing that you said or that thing that your guest said, I took it with me and I'm implementing it in my life, or it made me see something differently, or it made me think differently. And then that person has become a more conscious teacher. We are all teaching all of the time. It's whether we're choosing to consciously be one of God's teachers or not. That's the question, really. So I love what you said about the 10,000, tens of thousands of teachers are needed. Tens of thousands. And you may not necessarily look like you have a big following when you are teaching. One of the women who I've worked with closely over the last year works in an auto shop in Michigan, and she has turned that place into a holy, sacred place. The people who come through those doors are not just coming to get their cars fixed, they're coming along to be met on a really deep level. And so she has this ability to see into what's happening for people beneath the layer of how they show up and what they present and all their grumbling and any complaints that they bring and problems with their car. And she's able to see their heart and to connect with people on this really deep level. The ripple effects this woman is creating are just phenomenal. They're profound. There's no Facebook page for that. There's no blog, there's no articles, there's no one liking it.
And yet a profound liking of it happening, something in the experience of the individual and so on, and those unseen ripples. I relate to so much of what you were speaking about there with my own podcast and offerings, and those moments where it's almost as if it's a God wink, something will come through and it will be like, oh yeah, it is affecting people, it is touching people and moving people. And this passion I feel about creating a deeper understanding of how the numbers or the volume are actually not as important as the level of vibration. So that woman working in the auto shop, she's affecting the number of people that are coming through each day, plus of course their family members and so on. But what I'm sensing is she's offering a transmission, a vibration that's of a higher vibration, a higher level than is perhaps typical around Michigan as you're wandering around the place. And that's transforming that little pocket. And what's happening in the world is not what's happening on the news, of course, which can be disheartening. And it's not what's happening in the Watkins Who's Who of spirituality. It's like, oh, there's 100 people that are influential. But there are tens of thousands of people like you and I who are taking on this role of being the teacher. And how exciting to be sharing this teaching, not as see me as a teacher, but be a teacher. Become a teacher. Go out into your community as a spiritual warrior, as a spiritual revolutionary. Do crazy stuff in the supermarket. Pass on love letters and so on. And create those millions of little moments that have ripples. That's such an empowering message at a time of such psychosis and insanity in the world.
Yeah.
That there is actually an answer, and it's an army of spiritual teachers. What a time to be alive. We were speaking about the movie thing, right?
Yeah.
It's such a great movie to be in. All these plot lines moving towards disaster and apocalypse and so on. You might like this, I heard the other day, the only apocalypse is the ego's apocalypse. That's what the ego is fearing, right? It's like it's sensing there's some big moment where it's all going to end, and of course it's only the ego's falling away that is ever feared. It's only that exposure that's ever feared. So I love this lens on the bigger picture as we're looking forward.
Yeah, I think the thing that many of the people in my community, many of the people I have worked with, and absolutely myself, the thing that I have walked through this world with is being so afraid of the ego, so afraid of it, so afraid of the things it tells me that I am, that I'm this shameful, toxic, bad person, that if you really saw me, Will, you couldn't possibly like or love or even be in the same room as me.
Utterly unlovable. That's the
Utterly
sort of the bottom
unlovable.
line of the ego story.
Yeah, and I think that if you study the Enneagram, when you get down to that sort of most dysfunctional aspect of each of the personality types, there's a particular story that the ego weaves for each personality type. And for my personality type, that story is I am defective.
What type are you?
I'm a 4 that goes to a 2 when I'm unhealthy.
Okay. I'm a 7, so I was hoping you'd be able to tell me what my key defective type is.
I don't know it well enough, unfortunately. You can look it up easily on the internet,
of course,
though.
of course. That's the mental note has been made.
But the thing is that the ego is actually afraid of me, of who I really am.
Of the presence of the awareness. So that fear is only ever caught up in that little functioning of consciousness, which still happens within the awareness that we are. And in each and every moment that is met with love, that the ego story, that the whole psychotic madness of it can be met with love.
Yeah.
This is the revolution, this is the new world being born, this is the new earth being born.
And I think there's so many different ways for people to work with that new earth, with that evolution that's happening. I work with people on a very personal level. I do very personal work with people to help them, first of all, actually process their life and a lot of what's happened in their childhood. But also to come to a place where you see it differently, where you actually look back at all the things that happened and you don't necessarily identify who you are by them. That, you know, I grew up in an alcoholic home. It doesn't have any charge. It doesn't have any, that I am one of life's victims because of what happened to me. It's like there were a certain set of parameters around me as a child. There was a certain condition that I grew up in, but that's not who I am. And I look back at my life now through having done quite a lot of different types of very deep inner work and now doing that with other people. And so that's the way that I like to approach the new earth and my contribution to it. And I like to reunite people with that child, with the shadow self, to actually lean into it and have an encounter with it so that you can see it's really nothing. And to embrace aspects of self that we've put into the basement and locked up and said, oh no, I can't go there, that's not safe. So this thing about teaching, it doesn't, this week, for example, I went to my first street dance class and it was amazing. It was amazing. I was like this fierce kind of fiery hip hop energy.
I was going to say street dancing is more like the hip hop sort of style and quite sort of rough and ready.
And I am so not rough and ready in hip hop. I am so uncool. I was such a geek at school, you know, and so
and your English,
riddled
I
with
know that
I'm so
dancing
English.
wasn't taught or off etiquette. So that was pretty wild, right?
It was wild, you know, and to lean into that and for that to be a teaching, for that to be, you know, a demonstration that actually I can become so much in this human life. There's so much that is inviting me to step into it.
Yeah, so many different ways to teach. I think hearing you speak of the inner child and the different aspects that has been previously made bad. So obviously there was a point where being the child of an alcoholic would likely have been a bad story or a problematic story or narrative. Or I know when I first encountered self-loathing and shame and so on in my experience, it was a problem. There was shame about the shame and self-loathing of the self-loathing. And part of the role of teacher for me, which seems to be very fundamental on an energetic level, is to love, to be able to offer loving presence to everything that comes forth, to be able to point to that, what's the line from A Course in Miracles? What would it mean to know that everything that has unfolded was designed by one that has nothing but your peace in mind? Something along those lines. Really to actually point people back to this again and again and again, that the fear is an illusion.
Yeah.
The entirety of the narrative, the entirety of the story is perfection unfolding, including whatever shadow government, whatever Illuminati, whatever David Cameron, the whole thing, the whole show, the whole movie is held in this awareness. And I think at times of the collective unfolding being as it is, with so many possible crises and a lot of fearful stories about what might be happening, this microcosm, macrocosm, the work we do with individuals personally to bring them into peace and acceptance and love of their own calamities and crises, as we out focus that into the world, to look at the world as it is and love it as it is in its calamity and in its crisis. This seems to be a function of the teacher as well, to meet the fear and bring love.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean being passive.
No.
It's a very, I think, quite common. One of my friends is a yoga teacher, and she talks a lot about how in that community people often avert their eyes from they won't watch the news or they won't engage with what's happening in the world because it's too distressing. And so it really is such a paradox. How do I love what's happening? And I don't really have an answer for this, Will. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. How do I love this and at the same time recognise the inherent illusion of what's unfolding, but not turn my eyes and turn my back and close my heart to the suffering that's happening?
It's a great question, isn't it? The dance that I am constantly learning with this Love and Truth Party thing in particular, because it's looking at the balance of what do we shine the light on, and we can't become whole as a human being, as an individual, until we've gone into our darkest places, right? We can't become unified until we have felt our, the most subtle traces of our shame, our fear, our self-loathing, perhaps several thousand times. So we know that facing the darkness is essential as a first step. So on the collective, we can't deny the darkness that has been at play, that is at play in the collective unfolding. That's a first step. And the mind sees it as two steps. So I'm feeling into this more deeply. The accepting and the seeing it becomes the loving it in that moment. And I'm thinking of experiences, so that sounds a little bit vague. Let's put it into a tight experience. I watched I just finished watching an astonishing 2-hour video about sacred geometry and all the rest, and the overall narrative of the unfolding of the collective consciousness, and how it's all ultimately good and where it's all going to end up and all the rest. And then at the end of it, it flipped onto another little video, this anonymous hackers group offering a really dark perspective on FEMA camps and so on and so on. And this brought up in me this contraction, this fear. And what was able to happen was to really feel into that, like, wow, there's this fear and darkness, there's this disconnect in me. So my answer is an ongoing exploration in my experience, to see where those edges are with me, to see when I look at Tony Blair and experience judgment. Can I look at a war criminal and recognize that he is a war criminal and love him, and recognize that it is an illusion, and come back to that place of pure awareness and love? And we were speaking a little bit about the importance of vibration rather than the volume or the number of likes and so on. And those moments cannot be underestimated in what they contribute to the collective unfolding. When we can go into the core of our righteousness, of our indignation, of our fear, and discover love. And it's that there are tens of thousands of us doing this, right? This is the work.
It is exciting.
Yeah,
it is exciting to think that there's so many people around the world doing this work.
And a yearning for more of it. You're speaking of the people moving towards the vulnerability or the authenticity, because we all want that authentic expression. So this is where I just get so jazzed, is having, building a community whose function is to awaken not for our own well-being, though that's where it begins, but actually to move away from that slightly narcissistic enlightenment for me game. But actually, why would I awake? Why would I become loving presence? Why would I realize that I am love? Why would I become a vessel for love to flow through? Sure, it's great fun for me, but clearly it's not about me, because me is just a construct, a figment of divine imagination. So this is where the excitement happens for me, is creating this army of loving revolutionaries.
What I saw in the Fearless Expression group last year, and what I continue to see in it this year, and what I've seen on lots of workshops that I've done on 5 Rhythms dance floors in different communities around the world that I've plugged into, is that piece that your interests are no separate than my own. And that's why I think, for me, I recently wrote a chapter about shame and about healing from shame, and I explained in it that a lot of that journey has been, and I don't want to ever give the impression that it's over, because like you said, it's feeling it thousands of times in all of its different ways, and then loving and forgiving it each time, and returning back to the truth. But for me, just in a one-to-one context is great, but it's actually incredibly powerful for me to go into the role of assisting and supporting and helping others. Because in doing that, that is how I come to see that, oh wow, we're all the same. There's only one of us here. It's like if you were to zoom out and look at the planet, and you actually grasp that we're all inhabiting the same space, even on the level of form, how could we ever think that just because we've created these artificial boundaries and lines, this is my garden, that's your garden, and neighbours battling over gardens, countries battling over territory, it is totally an illusion that we have separate interests.
And that happened, of course, 50 years ago. We actually saw, for the first time as a human consciousness, the Earth from that far away, from space. I think 61, I think it may have been, that we got to actually see that. And that goes into the collective consciousness. And if we look at what's happened in the last 50 years, in terms of the civil rights movement, in terms of the environmental movement, in terms of the upsurge in spiritual interest and awakening, in spite of a culture that would deny the spiritual, that would say we're just bodies and so on, it's a game changer. And we now, of course, have this internet thing that multiplies this capacity to take multiple perspectives. I love being able to watch a documentary and see someone's life, like really get into someone's unique experience. This capacity to take on perspectives is just multiplied in an unfathomable way these days.
And to appreciate the places where we are so different because of culture, or gender, or age, or background. But also then to just be flabbergasted by the places where we're the same. And I used to teach English as a foreign language, and I did it on and off for a number of years. And I had so many incredible experiences of teaching multiple nationalities in one classroom, or sometimes just 2 nationalities in one classroom. And to hear all of these different perspectives on, you know, when you're teaching a lower level of a foreign language, it's like, describe your house. And so people would be describing their houses, and in some cultures the men and the women sit separately and they have separate quarters and separate rooms. Or you eat at different times of the day, or you never speak to your parents, or all these different things. And it was so fascinating to see people recognising the sameness, and also to see people gravitating towards people of their own nationality as well, to see this kind of back and forth, you know, oh, differentness, sameness, differentness, sameness, and to see that playing out. But I also feel that people who do this work, and I do think for me it starts with the personal, because when there's so much going on in here that I can't really see outside of self, I can't differentiate what's me and what's the pain that I've been carrying for years, and how can I really be effective, truly effective, when I'm just projecting my own stuff out left, right and centre, using myself as an example. But I think that people who've done a certain amount of work, and there's a solidness there, they are a political force to be reckoned with.
Tim Freak, my friend, I love he's been on the show as well. He uses the word that love is a political action, or the phrase that love is a political action.
Oh, maybe I wrote a blog post recently called Love is a Political Act. I just haven't published it yet. But
I'm pretty sure Tim didn't come up with it. That's one of those lines that's too good. I'm sure it's been used many times before. And I think that's where so many of us, it seems, are heading, as the awakening scene and consciousness scene ripens and matures. There's a recognition that the ultimate function of all this has to be some degree of impact upon social justice, upon creating more functional communities, lessening suffering in the world. And this Gandhian invitation to be the change, I think we're working out a little bit more and more what that actually means, and how significant it is when we walk around in the world being the change, when we walk around in the frequency of love. And that feels like teaching, that feels like a really nice summary of what teaching is, right? To actually be walking, embodying the frequency of love and sharing that with every emotion we experience and every apparent other that we encounter, to collapse the matrix again and again and again into loving presence. Makes me want to go down to the supermarket with you and just get some trolleys and do some revolutionary action.
Let's do it now. Let's just have a little...
And the security guard says, what are you doing? We're creating a revolution. We'll bring the camera.
Yeah.
This feels like a really nice summary of what teaching is. And I'm feeling a great deal of appreciation to get to know a teacher such as yourself, Elloa, and whenever I meet someone such as yourself who's doing such powerful work, it heartens me and encourages me. So thank you for being who you are, and thank you for joining me today on Awakening Dialogues.
Thank you so much. I have to say in closing, I feel that it is that piece about vibration that is so significant. I really want to hear that reminder myself, that it doesn't matter what it looks like according to the ego's checklist.
Measurements,
The ego's measurements.
How many likes,
it is
how long
so
it lasted, time,
not
all these
about
illusions.
That. What matters is, am I walking consciously with love? Am I bringing love to this day, to this moment? Am I practicing that radical gratitude that you speak about?
And so often we hear, and then what? And what I would say is, that's it. In teaching students, people will often say, okay, so I found inner peace, then what? I found the frequency of love, then what? Well, how about just residing in the frequency of love for a while? How about just residing as inner peace for a while? Maybe this is it.
Yeah.
Maybe this is it right here and now. Very cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Mm.